Thank you, Ria, and good morning to you. Good morning, Nigeria. And it's a beautiful Monday morning here in the FCT. Thank you for joining us on FCT Brief.
Good morning, Nigerians, and also a beautiful week ahead of us. TJ, let's start with what we have.
Of course. Well, good morning. Welcome again to FCT Brief, your incisive window into national issues shaping Nigeria's security and governance. Today, we'll be looking at the nation's defense architecture as we examine the tasks ahead of the new service chiefs. The recent appointment have stirred discussions on expectations, performance benchmarks, and the urgent need to address Nigeria's persistent security challenges. The change in military leadership comes at a time when the country continues to grapple with insurgency in the northeast, banditry and kidnappings in the northwest, and rising cases of violent crimes across several regions. Nigerians are watching keenly to see how the new service chiefs will redefine strategy, boost troop morale, and restore public confidence in the armed forces.
Beyond operational tactics, there is the question of synergy, how well the security agencies can coordinate intelligence, logistics, and operations to deliver on the President's directive for a safer and more stable Nigeria. The service chiefs must also navigate the delicate balance between civilian oversight and military effectiveness in a democratic setting. To help us unpack the task ahead, we have two distinguished guests joining us on the program. Captain Bish Johnson is a retired U.S. Army officer and a military strategist. He's right here in the studio with us.
Good morning. Good morning. You're welcome.
Thank you.
Brigadier General Sani Usman, retired, who will be joining us in the course of this program, was the former Director of Army Public Relations. Now, together, they will provide insight into the strategic direction, leadership expectations, and reforms required to strengthen Nigeria's security framework. Now, Captain Bish, let me start with you. Now, we've gone through many sacks of service chiefs and appointments of new ones. And in all these, the terrorists, the kidnappers, and the bandits seem to be getting more daring. Now, they don't deploy even drones to prosecute their own criminal activities. Now, how effective would you say this change can bring to the way we prosecute this war against these criminals? And also, how often do you think it's necessary to effect changes of service chiefs?
Well, okay. The issue of command change is a routine thing in the armed forces. That's what we call billets in the armed forces and in most security organizations, which means you go into a position for a specific period of time, usually 2 years, 3 years. And so while in that position, whatever is needed for you to do, you have to do within that time period. When the time comes for you to rotate or retire, you have to retire. That's what we call mandatory removal time. When it gets to that mandatory removal time, you have to go, right? The reason is because new people must have to rise because they have to grow through their career chain to ensure that you have the morale, you boost the morale of the soldiers. If you're stagnated in a position, it leads to decline in effectiveness. So command change is routine. People will come, people will go. That's why we emphasize in building strong institutions rather than strong personalities. Because you can't build an institution around an individual, because eventually that individual must leave. They can die, something may happen to them, and so it's routine. Now, are there some risk to command changes? Of course, in every time you change command, it's a bag of risk and opportunities. The opportunities, of course, is that there will be people who will rise through the chain. It could lead to boost in morale. But the risk is that as you remove people, there may be a short-term disruption in terms of operation, such as loss in operational memory. Yeah. But I've looked at this particular change that was done. It is not like the kind of changes that you saw in previous administration where everybody leaves at once. What happened in this instance is that the Chief of Army Staff was elevated to Chief of Defense Staff. Now, you have retained some level of institutional memory in that instance because he is not new to what has been going on. And then the Chief of Intelligence was not changed. He remains in his position. So I would say that this particular reshufflement was strategic and targeted so that you don't lose all of the institutional memory of what has been going on before the change.
Well, President Tinubu emphasized professionalism, vigilance, and camaraderie in his charge to the new service chiefs. Does that imply that these values had been weakened under the previous military leadership?
Well, the thing is that as you are in a position, of course, there will be challenges. Now, when challenges show up, depending on how you manage it, command presence is probably one of the most required threat that every commander must have. The mere fact that you are in this location changes everything. That's what we call command presence. The presence of the commander must be felt, in every operation. Now, as time goes on, depending on how effective and the relationship between the commander and the subordinates, because no commander works alone. People have to support you and feed you with information. The military is more like, it's a community. It's a system where you have several organs, and each organ has to function effectively for the entire system to be able to function effectively. And so, depending on how that commander is able to manage those units, those other commanders, it may get to the point that he may begin to lose the confidence of those who are working for him. In those instances, unit cohesion will begin to suffer. And when unit cohesion and comradeship, like you said, begin to suffer, the operations will also begin to suffer. I don't know if that is what was the case in this particular instance, but it does happen where the commanders start losing, the commanders begin to lose trust in their commander.
Okay, it is said that a change is a change, but a change may not also be a change, just an ordinary change, if there are new tactics introduced. Now, in this instance, what are those changes in tactics you will expect that the new commanders will bring on board? We've had issues where we talked about kinetic and non-kinetic, and we still had this upsurge in this criminality. Now, what are those practical changes you will be expecting that the new commanders, the new chiefs will bring on board so that it will not be business as usual, and because we are getting to an election year where we will need to enforce the superiority of our military over these criminals?
Okay, now, these service chiefs are, of course, what we call strategic leadership. They are not usually involved in the tactical operations, right? The people who are usually involved in tactics, at the tactical level, are the junior level officers, the captains, the lieutenants, sometimes the major. The generals are usually at the very top echelon. They are the ones who design the strategy of what happens at the strategic level. Of course, they get briefings from the presidency, with the national security advisor, and they put them into a strategy. The strategy devolves into tactics as it goes down. It's all of those tactics that come together to achieve the strategic objective of the commander-in-chief. Now, every leader has one or two things that it can contribute in terms of the policy direction, depending on what they see on ground, the report that they get. And so it is not possible for me to sit here now and tell you that this is the direction that any service chief is going to go, because they have to look at what is happening on ground, and based on what is happening on ground and the directives that they get from their commander-in-chief, they will be able to evolve a new strategy going forward. Of course, there will be changes because you have new energies being injected into the system, because you have new people at the helm of affairs. So it's after a while that we will know the strategies that these new service chiefs are going to evolve. But let me say this, because I've always said it, each time there's a change in service chiefs. You know, we look at these service chiefs as if they're going to go there and do magic. They cannot do magic. The insecurity problem in Nigeria can't be solved by service chiefs alone. There is no one service chief or group of service chiefs that are going to solve the insecurity problem of Nigeria on their own. It is a collective effort of both the political leadership and the military leadership, and even the civilian population, which is us, coming together, we'll be able to solve our insecurity problem. There are structural issues that we have to address, regardless of who is the service chiefs. One of them is we have to deal with the issue of our porous borders. Our borders are too porous, and so long as those borders remain porous, and we don't know who and who is crossing into our country, and for what purposes, and what they're bringing in, we will continue to go in this cycle. So it's not a matter of changing service chiefs. You can change service chiefs and you discover that you just recycle the same problem. If you don't deal with those structural issues. We have to deal with corruption. We have to deal with the delay in funding. I've had issues about, I've had people say, look, we are funding our military more now than ever. The thing is that if you compare what we are spending in our defense and national security per capita with even our poor neighbors, you discover that per capita we are spending less than some of these poor countries. And even when the fundings come, they do come late. Security is something that, you know, you have to be able to respond. They're all time dependent. You have to be able to respond as at that time. If you delay in funding as a result of politics, then by the time that fund comes around, the problem that you intend to use it to solve may have evolved even more, that the funding may not be sufficient again to deal with it at that time. You have to go back and seek for additional funding. And they will go back and they will delay debates. And by the time they get that additional funding, the problem continues to evolve.
Well, some people are saying that these new service chiefs are stepping in at a time when the confidence in the country's security architecture is low. Now, with this new appointment, what message or what signal do you think this will send to the insurgents and also international partners?
Well, of course, for one thing, the message that will be sent to the insurgents is that this leadership is not afraid to take bold decision and a high-profile decision. The change of service chiefs is a very high and very bold decision. So it sends that signal to the insurgent that the commander-in-chief can take decisive actions to inject new ideas and to come frontally to deal with the security situation in the country. And the message you will send to the international community depends on how the new service chiefs operate, you know, how effective they become. Like, are they able to deal with some of the challenges that their predecessors were not able to deal with? Were they able to identify new areas of improvement? How effective are they able to collaborate with their sister agencies? Because, like I stated earlier, even the armed forces can't exist on their own. They also depend on collaboration with the other sister agencies, for example, the DSS, the police, even the civil defense, and to a very greater extent, the civil population. You can't win any war. There is no war that has been won without the support of the civil society, the population, you know, because the population are the people who are supposed to give you intel. Yeah, there are other sources of intelligence, like electronic intel that you get with use of equipment, but that human intelligence is primary, is critical, and that will come from the population. And so that's what the message that will be sent to the international community will depend on how the new service chiefs, you know, proceed.
Now, we may not be able to sit here and say this is these are the strategies the new service chiefs should deploy. But if we also look at some of the decisions the previous service chiefs have taken, like probably the political leaders have taken, should we expect changes? For instance, you have situations where we talk about de-radicalization of these criminals, and does that in a way weaken the morale of the fighting men? And also some argue that, look, it's not just the use of force. You also need to apply the carrot approach. So where do we strike the middle ground between de-radicalization and also ensure that the morale of the fighting troop is boosted so that those they fight against are not reintegrated into the society and all that? So where do we find the middle ground?
Well, there is no way you're going to, we can't kill everybody. And there is no way we are going to kill ourselves out of the problem. Eventually, we have to find a middle ground. There have to be some level of negotiation. If you know who you are negotiating with, right? For established terrorist organizations, we know they have leadership. Now, for these bandits, I don't know if there is anybody to negotiate with in the bandits in their organization. They don't have formal structure. For me, the banditry is more or less driven by economic benefits. These are people that want to infiltrate the country.
But they have known faces that are the leaders.
Yes, even if you eliminate those people, because of the economic drive in it, there will be new people will emerge. Most of the bandits, what are they doing? They are mining our mineral resources. Basically, that's what they're doing. They are mining the mineral resources. They are kidnapping people for ransom, for economic purposes. It's a commercialized enterprise. So even if you negotiate with these known faces today, and they say they won't do it again, it's not true. If you give whatever incentive you give them, they'll use that incentive to go and acquire more weapons and come back to the same practice because of the economic incentives that are there. Now, for the terrorists, they are usually driven by ideology. Now, so they have structure. You can negotiate with them on how to accommodate some of their demands, but not the demands that are actually going to affect you as a nation. Now, it's not everybody that we will also have to try to negotiate with. There are hardcore people that no matter whatever you do, they will remain there. You're not going to negotiate with, what's his name? The top echelon of Boko Haram that took over from the late Yusuf. You're not going to negotiate with him. The people that you negotiate with are usually the low-level people who sometimes were coerced into, joining the group. It was not their intention to be there, but they were forced into it because of the situations that they found themselves. Those are the people you may necessarily negotiate with and pull them to your side as against to the side of the terrorists. But the actual terrorists, there's nothing you can do other than to fight them and eliminate them, And so, yes, there will be de-radicalization of the lower level personnel. There will be also, you have to use that carrot and stick approach to deal with the situation because you're not going to kill everybody and you can't kill yourself out of the problem. So at some point, there have to be a middle ground.
All right, Captain, we'll still come back to you, but that'll be right after this short break. Don't go anywhere, there's more. Thank you for staying with FCT Brief. Now, we'll still go back into our discussion on the task ahead of the new security chiefs, and we'll still have with us Captain Bish. Now, 8 African countries around us have fallen under military rule in 4 years. How would you say Nigeria's new service chiefs should learn from the lessons to avoid such a reoccurrence in Nigeria?
Well, okay. I think the case of Nigeria is, a bit different from what has happened in some of those African countries, because our democracy is a bit more entrenched, not just only in our psyche, but also in the system. It's easier in some of those countries for the armed forces to strike a coup and succeed. In Nigeria, with the way our armed forces are structured, it's very difficult for coup to succeed in this country. Because if you carry out one at a particular unit, you sure will have a counter from another unit. So, and because of the penalty involved when you strike and fail, I doubt any military personnel in their right sense we want to venture into such a dangerous and risky operation in Nigeria. Right? I've heard about the rumors that are making rounds in the social media. I don't know to what extent those are true, but I've looked at the units where some of those who they said were arrested come from. These are not units that can effectively execute a coup in Nigeria and be successful. I've also seen and read about the explanations or statements from the armed forces why those people were arrested. I will not speculate. I don't have the details of what happened, but based on my own experience from my own service, nobody gets arrested and detained for failing to pass promotional exams, right, or being stagnated in position. If you're stagnated in position, one or two things is going to happen. You either remain in that position until you get frustrated and asked to leave, or they remove you. There is a time period, if you don't advance from one pay grade to the other, you'll be removed. But I don't see such a drastic measure taken where if you don't advance, you are detained. It didn't happen in my own service. I don't know what the policy it is in Nigeria, but a lot of things are not just making logical sense, you know, both on both sides, both on the side of those who believe that a coup had taken place and those who said, look, no, there is nothing like that, because not every military unit can conduct a coup, as you said.
Okay. This war. What political decisions would you expect that this government will begin to take to help advance this beyond just the change of service chiefs?
Yes.
What political decision should the president take?
As I stated earlier, I said that the removal of the service chiefs alone, without proper reform, is not going to solve our problem. We have structural problem in terms of our security architecture. There's discussions on whether we should have state police or not, right? The truth of the matter is that it is becoming increasingly impossible for the federal government alone to give us the kind of security that we need. The federal government alone can't fund security. You know, it has to get to the point where the subnational entities we have to come in and also fund security. Now, I understand some states are doing one or two things for security agencies, but some of the things they are doing are the things that will only impact them. You understand? For example, I build offices, provide air conditions. Yes, I can do that as a state governor. I can buy operational vehicles for them as a state governor, because I know if they get transferred to another place, they're not going to take those things with them. Now, I may be very reluctant as a governor to send police officers or soldiers for training overseas, because most times their tenure in a state maybe 3 years, 4 years, right? I send you for training and you come back in the next 6 months, you're transferred to Zamfara State. What I have just achieved is wasting my state resources to train you to go to another state, right? Now, but if we have, say, state police, and I know that you are permanently in my state, it's my responsibility to make sure that I not only provide you with equipment, but I will also provide you with the necessary training that you need. And so we have to look at those structural issues that I have mentioned. One being our porous borders, to issue of decentralization of policing. Of course, you can't decentralize the armed forces, decentralization of policing. Issue of corruption, because it's not just only about throwing money at the problem. There's the little money that we are investing. How effectively are we using them to deal with our problem? How much of it actually goes into solving those problems? And how much of it goes to lining up pockets of people? So those structural issues, we have to be dealt with. If we don't deal with those structural issues, you can't expect any service chief to go there and do any magic. It's not going to happen.
Mm-hmm. Well, we are now seeing conflicts play out online, including narratives of this alleged Christian genocide being amplified globally. Now, how would you say Nigeria's security apparatus should respond to this influence campaign without silencing legitimate grievances?
Well, information warfare has always been part of warfare. You know, if you watch what happened between the Israelis and the Palestinians in Gaza, most of the time the Israelis are dropping leaflets of information, you know, trying to pass one message or the other to the Palestinians. You know, you can also see Hamas using videos and stuff like that. They're trying to send out message. So there's never been any conflict situation or like the kind of situation that we find ourselves that you don't manage information. You have to manage information. It's very critical. It's part of warfare. There are people in the armed forces whose specific responsibility it is to manage what information goes out to the public and what information does not go out to the public. Now, the military can't stop for a very vibrant society like ours. The media is very vibrant in Nigeria. Nigeria is not one of those countries that you say that, you know, you don't have freedom of the press. Our press is a very vibrant sector. And so you can't suppress the press in Nigeria. They will be able to still get out their own information. What the military can do is like what happened in this particular instance where, you know, it's making rounds that there was a coup. And the armed forces came out and said, no, there was no coup. This is what it is. And they put out their own information. And so that's the much they can do, is to try to be upfront, you know, in trying to not allow an information island or gap to exist. Because if there's a gap in communication, people will fill that gap with whatever information they feel like. So that's the much they can do. Be upfront, don't allow communication gap to exist, put out, you know, information even ahead of time. You must not always be on countering information all the time. You must sometimes be upfront and put out the information first, you know, and not allow people to fill the gap, and then you now have to go back to start countering what information has been put out.
Okay, there's this military-civil population relations. And I think people have said that it has a way of affecting the confidence of the public in its military.
Sure.
Would you say that the attitude where some personnel feel that they are superior to what is usually say bloody civilian is an attitude that should be encouraged, or we should find a way to re-educate our military that, look, you are always subordinate to the civil population because it is the taxpayers that pays you. Is there a way this can help boost the confidence of the people? Because if you're talking of giving information, intelligence, it's when you have this cordial relationship of mutual respect that people will volunteer. So to what extent can it help?
Okay. The Nigerian military has improved significantly. We know that. And it's not contestable. If you compare the military that we have now with the military that existed, say, in 1983, or around that time where soldiers flog civilians in the street. You cannot say that this is the military that we have now. Yeah. I have interacted with a lot of our military personnel, security officers, very professional, very cordial. And so we have improved a lot. I don't think that the issue of bloody civilian is, that's not the issue, that is not our problem anymore. Yeah. The time where the military people feel that they are superior to civilians, I think is long gone. You know, you just said now that the president is a civilian, but he had just changed service chiefs who are military personnel, right? But in those days, the military was in charge. And so they impose themselves on us and they give orders on what should happen. Now, the civilians are the ones that give the military order of what should happen. So the issue of subordination, it is not an issue. It's not an issue now. What is issue is how we are able to harness the relationship between us and the civil population such that we are able to collect intelligence from them. I think that's the area that we have to work more on, but not on the issue of mutual respect for each other. That respect is there. Our military is much more professional now than before. You know, they have transformed themselves very significantly, you know, and so I don't see that as an issue other than us trying to figure out how and what we should do to gain the confidence of the people, the citizens, such that they can volunteer information to us. Sometimes they don't do this because there have been instances where people volunteered information and they were outed. Yeah. And those who were on the other end of it came back to hunt for them. So people fear for their own personal safety. And so they prefer to keep what information to themselves for fear of reprisal should they volunteer. We have to work more on that, you know, sabotage and all of that. That is the area that I think that we still need to improve on.
Still closely related to what you just said, for years, Nigeria security agencies have worked in silos to ensure. What structural changes would you advise to ensure genuine intelligence sharing across the military, talking about the police, the DSS, and local security networks?
Local security, when you say local security networks?
Like the vigilantes and all of that. Okay.
Well, it's one area that we also have, one area that we are not, we've not done very well. The area of, for example, this private security sector. There is virtually no part of this country where you don't have their presence. I think the last statistics that I had was that there are about 5 million of these private security personnel in this country. Now, if we can harness them in such a way that they are working with us, they are collaborating. If we need intel from a security guard in Katsina, there's a way we can reach them and get that intel from them. If we can bring all together, right, the private sector to work together with our security agents, it will expand our reach in areas where the public security agencies are not available because they are limited in manpower. We can utilize those people. But it needs some reform. It needs some reform. We have to reform the private security sector, and that's where the civil defense has to come in. You know, some of us have made some proposals to them on how we think that we can reform that sector, because that is a reserve of intelligence for us, which we are not effectively utilizing now. Yeah. Now, so there is no game saying that, look, no agency can do it alone. There must be that collaboration and cooperation across all the security agencies, both horizontally and vertically. And that is what the Office of the National Security Advisor is supposed to do, is to bring all of them together in such a way that they are sharing information amongst themselves.
All right.
I don't know to what extent that is being done and how effective it is, because we still have problems with intelligence.
All right.
Well, thank you so much, Captain Bish. It's a pleasure speaking with you this morning. Quite insightful conversation we've had in the last 40 minutes.
Exactly.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Unfortunately, we were able to get Brigadier General Sani Usman retired on the show, but we hope that we'll get him some other time. Thank you so much for staying with FCT Brief. We'll now hand you over to Lagos, where Ria and the rest of the team are standing by to continue with the rest of the show.
All right, thank you so much, Abuja. Mungode.